we all come together here. And we would like to dive deeper a little bit into political waters, so to say. So we want to use this framework in a way to make some keynote insights, or get some keynote insights from politicians or people who are involved in politics with very different backgrounds and from very different parts of the world. And we don't want to find anything other than to get some flesh on the bones for a coming progressive renaissance. So that's obviously a big task for all of us here on stage, and especially for our distinguished speakers here. And thank you so much for joining us, and we're very delighted to have you here on stage. And as I said already, we've got very different backgrounds. We have with us VALÉRIE RABAULT, who is an MP for the Socialist Party, actually the leader of the Parliamentary group in France. So we have a politician from the national level. We have with us Jack MARKELL, who is the governor of Delaware between 2009 and 2017. So we have someone who was right on the front of politics on the state level. And then we go even one step further down and have Quentin with us, who is the mayor of a mid-sized town in Iowa, Waterloo, which has some specific challenges and problems that he'll be telling us about. And we don't want to hear any less from you, and MARIJE LAFFEBER will join us in a second as well. She is the mind and the heart of the Party of European Socialists. So she's very much involved in bringing together and coordinating the activities of the center-left parties who are campaigning for the European elections. So she will also be able to give us a perspective that then comes in from an international or European level. So maybe let's start with you, Valérie, and give you the word first. So the idea is just to maybe briefly analyze the situation, where you're coming from your specific political angle in France. And you've had a very rough time in recent years, the center-left in France, and how you can use some of the things we've talked about today, the analytical framework, in order to propel and form one or two really big ideas that would bring forward this progressive renaissance that we would like to all see in the very future, near future.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for invitation today. So it's a pleasure to be here in Berlin, as each time, I would say. I was there 2 years ago. It was in 2017. It was in July, just a few days after Emmanuel Macron election in France, which for us, as you imagine, was a big shock, because we were roughly 300 MPs, socialist MPs in the Assemblée Nationale, and now we are only 30. So, as you see, it has been divided by 10, which is, of course, very difficult. This is why maybe this is for the first time a woman is heading the group in the Assemblée Nationale. Maybe there is a correlation between the two. I don't know. No, sorry for that. But it's true that it has been for us a big shock. So 2 years after, some of you might think, maybe now again, that Emmanuel Macron was a progressive, as he mentioned in his campaign. For French people, this is not anymore the case, because after 2 years in power, they've seen that the politics that have been implemented are more right-wing driven than left-wing driven. I.e., he has he has cancelled the taxation on big capital. He has cancelled some of taxation for very rich people. And it tried, but it did not succeed, to implement green taxation, i.e. to increase the existing green taxation for all French people. And as you may have seen in the press, it has, the consequence was this yellow jacket move that is not finished yet. So for French people, Emmanuel Macron is not anymore perceived as progressive, and this might be the case maybe within in some of the European and America and other countries, but as a perception in France, this is not anymore the case, which is, of course, a little bit in contradiction, because he has been elected. Well, he has been elected, I would say, by 60% from people coming from the center-left, and 40% of people coming from the right, center-right, I would say. But when you see the group, his group in the Assemblée nationale, there are around 300 MPs. They're more, I would say the gravity center is more on the right side than on the left side. So this is for what is happening in France. And within this situation, we need to rebuild. This is for us within the Socialist Party. We call it also Renaissance, progressive Renaissance. This is exactly the same as a word as the one you used. Renaissance, i.e. we need to rebuild what could be a progressive task and progressive force for the coming years. It's not easy, because it was discussed this morning, I would say that to sum up, and I see it's a summary, but to sum up, social democracy or social or progressive politics was based on two legs, I would say. The first one is to create value for the society, and the second leg is to share this value. And when you fail on one or the other, this is, of course, very difficult to convince people that social democracy, that progressive, has an impact on the day-to-day life of the people. It was said this morning, we are at a turning point, i.e. in France, of course, but also in Europe. It will be seen in the coming weeks with the European election, of course. And I think we should go back. It's not go back to the past, but to invent the futures, but having some principles. We need to prove that we are the only political force, I would say, able to create value for the society. We lost this objective. I don't know if it was aimed to lose it or not, but it is true that people do not recognize us as people creating value for the society. And I think one way to proceed to prove that we did not give the keys to the financial sector. This is how our people, this is the case in France, sometimes perceive us. They perceive as the guys and ladies who gave the keys to the financial sectors, i.e. they did not see any difference for their day-to-day life between what could do the left and what could do the right. I think we need to recreate this frontier between the left and the right. If not, this is exactly what Emmanuel Macron did in France. He recreated a frontier between he and the populism. But if you base the political life based on populism and progressive, you know that at the end of the day, the populists win. The sooner or the later, but they win. And this is very dangerous. We need to have a frontier between progressive and conservatives, between the right and the left, and people should perceive that in their day-to-day life. So maybe to conclude on two proposals. We had in Europe the Juncker plan. Juncker plan, no one, I'm sure even in this room, no one dream about the Juncker plan. This was 500 billion of euros, but no one can win about 500 billion of euros. No one. We need to say what we want to do. We mean to say that we will make for you a house, which green house. We explain that we need to develop the public transportation. We need to put on the table a green plan that could have very concrete signals for people. And I think on this progressive, I think we should agree on what we could do. I'm more optimistic on this target than on the second one. And the second one is concerning refugees and migrations. I know that in Europe we do not agree on the solution we need to put on the table. This one is much more difficult for us, progressive, because within our parties, or between our parties, we have big differences. And what is a proof for that is that when we meet together, and we had a meeting 2 months ago here in Berlin, within Socialist and Social Democrat parties, this question is the one on which we do not agree. So for us, if we are not able to start with a small solution, not to have the big plan, but to put a small solution on the table, the nationalists, they will have the space to put their ideas on the table and on Europe. So on this question, we need to make some efforts. On the first one, which is to, let's say, to have a big green plan, but not speaking about billions, but speaking about what could it change in your day-to-day life, to explain that you will reduce your electricity bill, that you will reduce CO2. I can't remember. The emission, sorry, the emission in the air. So this is a positive message that we need to put on the table. What Macron, just to finish with that, made with his green plan was a negative message, because people perceive the green transformation as an increase in taxation. And for people who have difficulties in financial difficulties, it has, for us in France, it has destroyed the positive message we could have on green transformation for our economy.
Very good, thank you, Valérie. So, if I get it right, then the small steps incrementally add up to a bigger picture, which will then sort of help to form, maybe a new social settlement or a new social contract, which is, you talked about, I find it interesting, you talked about frontiers, or probably a clear distinction between the left and the right, which has been softened, I reckon, by Macron's pitch to the political center and to the electorate, by kind of like taking this divide sort of away and putting himself in the center ground. We'll come back to all of these in a Q&A session, but I'd like to move on to Jack and getting your views from the US, from the other side of the Atlantic. There's a different situation, obviously. Democratic Party is still very much alive and not on the brink of total extinction, like some other parties, progressive parties in Europe. So maybe just coming in from the state level and giving the kind of like framework of a new social settlement. What are your what's your assessment, and also what are you kind of like 2 or 3 big ideas for this progressive renaissance?
Okay, well, thank you, Florian. Great to be with all of you. This morning, Dominic, when you started, you said something along the lines of why would the Americans come so far for this conference. I mean, one, we certainly are interested in learning from all of you. And secondly, we feel incredibly badly about how much damage Donald Trump is doing to transatlantic relations. And we want you to know directly from us that he does not represent the country. He certainly does not represent our party, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that in 2020 there's somebody in the White House who understands the importance of rebuilding those relationships. The good news is that he has been unable to enlarge his support during the last 2.5 years. He still has too much support, but he's been unable to enlarge what he's got. And earlier this week, a new poll was out that said he has tied his all-time low at 39% favorable. What does it mean for us as Democrats? We have always needed to have a big tent in order to win. We need to have a broad coalition. In our country, the idea of winning simply by turning out your base vote, sometimes it'll work in a city, occasionally it may work in a state, but oftentimes even in a state, if you just focus on turning out your base, you're likely to come up short. And so you really have to make sure that you're winning not just an overwhelming portion of your own party, but you need to win over a lot of the independents and some of the disaffected Republicans as well. And that's exactly what we need to do at the state level, is certainly what we need to do at the country level in 2020. Now, it is true that many of our young people have moved to the left in recent years, and frankly, it's hard to blame them. If you think about the lives that they have been living, what has been their life's experience? They've lived through the financial crisis, which was an incredible disaster. They have lived through the wars that have literally been going on their entire lives, and they have lived through a time of political polarization that has essentially paralyzed our national government. So they have very much earned their right to be cynical. And on top of that, the American dream, we speak a lot in our country about the American dream. And the American dream has always meant that it didn't matter much where you were born, but that if you worked hard and you played by the rules, you could get ahead. And it wasn't always perfect, but for generations, it was really true. You could grow up poor, but you could enter the middle class and have a successful life. But the truth is that for so many now, that contract has essentially been broken. I know when I was growing up, we were very proud of the idea of the mobility, economic mobility in our country. And you could be born into the bottom 10th of income for your family, but you could move up significantly during your lifetime. And now that's just much more difficult for our young people to see in their own lives. Which is why, by the way, when Joe Biden, who was before he was vice president, he was a U.S. senator for 36 years from my state of Delaware. When he announced just this morning his candidacy for the president, one of the things he talked about is that America is an idea. That was sort of the tagline. America is an idea, and that idea of economic mobility and everybody being able to enter the middle class is at the core of it. So if this next generation sees that contract as being broken, it's no wonder that they are angry. It should make all of us angry. But the question is, what do we do as a party with that anger? We have to hear it, we have to respect it, and then we have to do everything we can to turn that grievance into optimism. And that is not something that we have done particularly well as a party. I think there are many reasons that you can point to when it comes to Donald Trump being elected, but part of it is that a lot of working people throughout our country really saw the Democrats as being somewhat elitist and condescending and out of touch with their lives. Valerie put it in the context saying that people don't perceive, I guess, the Social Democrats as adding value. And I think that's a more eloquent way of putting it than what I said. But I mean, if people feel that we are not respecting who they are, what they're really looking for is they're looking for candidates, they're looking for public servants who understand the challenges that they're going through, who have a perspective on what we can do to address those challenges and make their lives better. And then they want people who are going to fight for them. And I think to some extent, our party got lost really on all three of those. And we have to demonstrate once again that we understand the challenges that our folks are going through, that we have ideas about how to improve their lives, and that in fact we're going to fight for them. So part of this rebuilding, and by the way, I will say that as much as the press has focused on this move to the left, and I give a tip of my hat to the left, because even though I disagree with them on many of their policies, I have to say that they did touch. They really brought a lot of passion out. They got people engaged in elections in a way that we had failed to do. But that being said, if you think about the outcome of the elections in 2018, although almost all of the attention from the press has gone to literally 4 or 5 newly elected members of our House of Representatives, the truth is we won many dozens of seats, and we won dozens of seats through problem-solving candidates who were able to speak to the challenges faced in these communities and who were able to win over big chunks of the middle. And that's something that we need to continue to do. And so part of that is very much understanding where our voters are. And there was some very interesting research done recently that identified a big chunk of our population described as the exhausted majority. And that sort of talks to a frame of mind about where our people are. I think exhausted in part because they do see that they're not only exhausted with their own challenges of getting ahead, working hard and getting ahead, but also saying that our national government is somewhat paralyzed. But what they really want, what this exhausted majority wants, when you dig into it, they're not looking for government to shield them from the changes in the economy. They're looking for government to help them adapt to the changes in the economy. And I think that is a nuance that we very much have to get right. And the politicians, I mean, Trump certainly said, we'll make America great again. I really do believe if we do a better job of persuading people that we can help them and their children adapt to all these changes to live a better life, that's going to be a winning formula in 2020. This is not the time for a detailed policy review, but I will tell you that organizations like Progressive Policy Institute, that is a partner here today, has done fantastic work over a long time now of putting out very specific policies for politicians and candidates of this ilk to live by. And I think it's something that we have to articulate the clear values, and then we have to live those values as well.
Thanks so much, Jack. Just because you mentioned, maybe a direct, quick response, you mentioned the American dream and that it's an idea, and that, maybe some young voters, but maybe other voters also feel like that this contract has been broken, right? So maybe you could just, we don't have to go into specific kind of like policy details, but maybe give us like 1 or 2 nuggets on what this new contract for a more inclusive society where people don't feel like they're left behind. We talked about this politics of solidarity this morning, which is rising on the left and the right. On the left, it feels like young people, as you described, are feeling kind of like the consequence of inequality. The right feels like, oh well, we haven't really talked about national identity, faith, and so on enough. So what are the 1 or 2 nuggets? Maybe give us a little bit of an idea of what this could look like.
So first of all, I want to be clear, it's not just the younger people who feel this way, it's their parents just as much, because the one thing that is uniform around the world is that parents want their children to be able to live better lives than they've lived. I mean, that is what we all hope for our own children. And unfortunately, there are way too many Americans, perhaps it's true in Europe as well, but there are way too many Americans who are not optimistic that their children will be able to live better lives. In terms of the political answer, I think, frankly, the people don't care about politics. They really don't. All they care about, and I think this is one of the things I very much liked about being a governor rather than in Washington, is we're not measured on the basis of whether we give a good speech or good rhetoric. We're measured on very simple things like, are our schools getting better? Are jobs more plentiful and better paying? And can we drink clean water, breathe clean air? And are our communities safe? And if we focus on those things, we'll do well. I do think the one place that we need to do a much better job is preparing people for a rapidly changing workforce. And we don't do a particularly job at the K-12 system. We don't do a great job at our universities. And I think part of the answer here is doing a much more effective job at bringing employers into the equation and helping the schools as well as our institutions of higher education understand at a much more granular level what kind of skills they're looking for so that our young people can graduate and actually go into a well-paying job. You know, we have a problem in the States that you don't have in Europe, which is the student debt problem. And, you know, people are incredibly angry about it. You have people graduating literally with a couple $100,000 in debt and not going into a job that is well-paying. So that's something we very much have to figure out.
Thank you. Let's just stay in the US for one moment before we come back to Europe and conclude with or finish with MARIJE, who has now joined us. Quentin, are the mayors kind of like the new rulers of the world or of politics? And that's kind of like the sense, we just had a quick peek into the breakout session, and we've been talking about all the kind of like, you know, social and economic kind of like reforms that you're able to implement on a local level to address some of these very tangible problems, and you'll tell us more about what's been going on in Iowa over the last 2 to 3 decades and what you've been doing. So yes, give us some views from the city level.
In 10 minutes or less. I just want to say once again, for those that didn't attend the earlier session, you know, thank you so much. What a wonderful opportunity for engagement and international conversation and about working together. So I echo Mr. Merkel's comments about partisanship and working together amongst international lines. But Waterloo, Iowa, 70,000 people directly in the middle of the country, and we call ourselves the Heartland. What's unique about Waterloo, Iowa is the state of Iowa is pretty much a white state, but the demographics within our state are changing. In a city like Waterloo, Iowa, with that 70,000, about 16% African American, Congolese, Liberian, residents from the island of Burma, Bosnian, so a very diverse city per capita, the most diverse city per capita in the entire state. We've seen some ups and downs where the home for John Deere's, the original foundry was in Waterloo, Iowa 101 years ago. So we've seen some challenges. The 80s were rough on our community, and we lost close to 17% of our overall population at that time. So we've had to learn some lessons about diversifying our economy and trying to set a new strategic vision for us to move forward. But any success that we've had has been with the mindset that we can achieve more together than apart. And as a local elected official, we don't have the opportunity to all of a sudden have a local government shutdown when we don't agree, or we don't have the opportunity as a mayor to walk away from the drawing board several months out the year for an end of the session. And when our opinions are different, we can't just shut you out so that your voices are silenced. And what we've seen on the right is that people, by the right, and sometimes the left, are that people are feeling left out of the entire process. Some of our citizens have lost hope in the democracies that are supposed to work for them and not against them, or the democracy that should work to solve complex problems instead of creating them. And our democracy should be, or the democracy that should be filled with inclusion and not segregation. So this upcoming election for where you're at and the elections that we're seeing in our states are absolutely critical to the futures of our community. And since you are here, I'm going to take it for granted that all of you feel the exact same way. And you see, because we all want communities that embrace progress for all of our people and not those that limit access and want to move us backwards. So the question of the hour is not what we have at stake, it's how do we win elections and change the outcome of those in our communities. See, Iowa is the first for the national caucuses that are here. So we have an opportunity to be up close and personal with all the presidential candidates. And I joked last night, I'm probably the last one not to make the announcement that I'm going to run for president too. But the caucuses are a great way and a great opportunity for engagement and real conversations, to go into the coffee shops, to go into people's houses, to be in gymnasiums on a small level and a large level, to really ask the tough questions of each of the candidates about how can you fix the complex problems that we see within our communities. And so it's absolutely important and critical that we make the right choice. And what I'm talking about are the everyday problems that were mentioned a little bit earlier. How are we going to keep our community safe? How are we going to make sure that we ensure economic development is spread across all of our communities? How are we going to make sure that housing is affordable for those that are most in need? So we have to take a step back from the 100-foot level and talk about the actual challenges that we've seen and how they can solve that. And then secondly, we have to learn how to shape the narrative, because for too long we have allowed the narrative of who we are as a party and our values to be shaped in the court of conservative appeal. And that narrative has to change to be inclusion, opportunity, and innovation to solve the complex challenges and build upon the tremendous opportunities that our futures hold. And thirdly, we have to be a people of actions and strong strategic platforms and strategic campaigns. I applaud think tanks because some of those on a national and a state level seem to get in trouble because they don't think at all. And think tanks are important for gathering new ideas, but people also want to know how this translates to economic inclusion, job creation, and the basic needs that transforms our lives. So we have to make sure we make them practical for people. But through these ideals, locally and national, we have been able to build the Van G. Miller Adult Basic Ed Center, which is a transformative education opportunity for immigrants and those that are needing an increase in adult basic education skills. And at the same time that our new immigrants are learning English language, at the same time, we're pairing them with particular skills that will help them to be able to have a career and an opportunity that is a real, sound, viable job to be able to support their families. Through collaboration, the state has formulated on a smaller level within our cities the Future Ready Task Force. And this is a task force that was formed to increase the credentialing of every resident in the state of Iowa so that 75% of all working age citizens will have some type of credentialed educational opportunity. So whether it is job apprenticeship programs, but also programs for those that come out of correctional facilities that need an opportunity to be able to work and have good paying jobs, and also those needing to upscale their skills to meet the demand of this new economic workforce. But that is a commitment from the states and our local communities. And last but not least, one concept, well, two, Mr. Markell, we actually visited Delaware to take a look at the educational program and how you've been able to transform your high school students to give them a career track by bringing in business and industry people from all across the diameter to make sure that you help them to be able to go directly into a career track. And so we've been able, in less than 2 years, increase the graduation rates for our students within our communities than they've been in many years before. And last but not least, is a concept, a bipartisan concept of opportunity zones. And that's where we can use tax policies to increase investments in communities that have been disengaged and seen little to no development. And through this collaboration, I've been able to travel with Bruce Katz and the Accelerator for America to places like Birmingham, to Philadelphia, to South Bend, to see how they're creating opportunities in the most impoverished areas of their communities. So this has been a wonderful template that we've been able to see that's out-of-the-box thinking for reinvestment and economic inclusion for the futures for all of our cities. Because our cities are the incubators for technology, growth, and creativity. And last but not least, Henry Ford said it the best. Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Quentin, and that was a clear answer to my question. So yes, mayors rule the world, and I really appreciate it. And there's so many questions to follow up, but we want to swing back to Europe now and hear from MARIJE what is happening to European socialists. So what are the challenges, and what are the kind of, I mean, you get a pretty good overview traveling north and south, east and west in Europe, so you have a pretty good idea of what the conversations are like. And you also get an idea of maybe which center-left parties in Europe have the capacities and the ideas to change the conversation. So curious to hear what's happening in Europe from you, MARIJE.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Florian, for inviting me, and thanks for organizing this fantastic event. Also, thank to MARIJE and everybody involved. It's not an easy question. So I just came back from a meeting with the SPD leadership because we have the European elections happening in 4 weeks, and it doesn't look too well in general. My role is I get paid by the Party of European Socialists to be optimistic. So I'm telling everybody we're going to win this. We can do this. And it's been really great because the last weeks I've been traveling all over Europe through talking with our member parties, through trying to train at least 15,000 people until May, which is, we're almost there, so it's good. But of course also talking to many people about what are these European elections all about. And basically they're about our day-to-day life and the concern of people. And there I think we have some real challenges. So first of all, I think our biggest challenge to the new European Parliament is in fact that the entire political landscape has changed. So everything we had known in the past, let's say traditional political parties and traditional structures and ways of working, they are disappearing because we have quite a lot of new parties. And we see that in many national states, we have a very fragmented political landscape. I come from the Netherlands. I always joke that, you know, you take 5 Dutch people, you will end up after an hour having at least 4 different churches, 5 different political parties. It's at least 6 action groups. We can never agree, and we don't have a threshold, so anyone who has an idea can run a political party, and that's basically also what we are doing in the Netherlands. Now we see this being translated to the European Parliament. So I expect this Parliament for the first time to have a real changed composition, and what we can see is a rise of right-wing, nationalist and extremist parties. And I think this is going to be a problem for us, because we really believe that you can, let's say, tackle challenges, bring solutions when you do that from a European perspective, and not when you just do it from a German perspective, or a Dutch perspective, or an Irish perspective, or a Bulgarian perspective, but we have to really work together. The agenda of these parties is not so much of working together. I mean, this is an agenda of underlining the differences between the different nationalities. So I always take the example, I live in Belgium, I come from the Netherlands. You don't want to know how many times I'm being told, speaking the same language, having the same cultural background, that, you know, the Dutch are so different than the Belgians. And in fact, in my opinion, they're not. So this, I think, is a problem, and it's a problem also for, let's say, our parties, because everybody says it's all because of these right-wingers and these populists, and they're so well in organizing. I don't think so. I mean, we see something happening, which I think is alarming, and that also should wake us up, is that there is indeed more international cooperation between right-wing populist and nationalist parties. So we see, for example, these parties looking at Trump, it's their hero. We see people looking to Bolsonaro in Brazil, see him as a great example. And this, you see, this cooperation, it's on the European level, but it's also on an international level. And I think this is something we really have to do better ourselves. Because in the last years, it's not that we grew closer together. We should grow closer together, because I think a lot of things happening in the United States, happening in New Zealand, in Australia, in the southern part of Latin America, in Europe are quite similar. And I think we can also learn much more from each other's successes and strategies to combat this. So this is one point I would like to raise. Then also, to look at ourselves, I think we were quite successful in the past, and of course we have a very long history. I mean, I come from the Netherlands, a country where we had a social democratic party for decades. We are one of the oldest parties. It's fantastic. We have a great history, and I think we also achieved a lot. So we were really promoting the agenda of equality, of social welfare, and after the Second World War, we were quite successful in governing and implementing and achieving a lot of what we have been fighting for. But now we see also the struggle in what is actually the people we are doing the fight for, and what is our electorate. And I think that it's already, let's say, a problem since at least 30, 40 years, that we are getting a bit lost, and I think we have missed the boat in some areas also because, let's say, we have a modern economy. We still think that we are working only for the blue-collar workers in the factories. Well, to be very honest, a lot of factories have already disappeared. I mean, the people we are working for is, amongst others, a whole new generation working in, let's say, the digital economy. We forget about it, but there's a lot of young people working in a digital economy. It's a different way of working. And we have, I think, not been, let's say, strong enough in defending their rights. So we've been defending the rights of the workers in the factories, but we have not defended the right and still are not doing it properly of those people who are working in the digital sphere. Like the Uberization of society. It's a nice concept, but it doesn't bring a lot of security to people. And I think there we have a serious issue. Also, we see the unequal distribution of wealth. And in particular, after the financial economic crisis, not a lot has changed. It didn't become less, it became even worse. So you see more people struggling to get, let's say, to make it to the end of the month. You see a small group of people that have become richer. And people understand that this is not okay at all. It's not okay at all. We try to manage the crisis, but I think that's another word we have to use here. We did too much of a management and too little of leadership. So it's like by the time we figured out that we had to do something, the crisis occurred, and we were just jumping to the stage of managing. Because we thought that in many countries, we should join governments to solve this crisis because the countries would be better off with us than without us. And in the meantime, we forgot to really develop new big projects, new big ideas, and show real leadership. And I think that is something we are now having to pay the price for. Also, I think the whole debate about migration and integration, I think we have missed the boat as well. We missed the boat there as well. We see it in my country. The rise of populism is just incredible. The right-wing nationalism, populism is incredible. Now, let's say, if we put all these small parties together, of right-wing nationalist populist parties, we have in the Netherlands 35% of the electorate supporting them. It's striking. It's really striking, because we are known to be a country of a lot of tolerance. But I think we mixed, in a way, tolerance with ignorance. You know, as long as you are not bothering me, I will not bother you. But it doesn't mean that we can have a clear conversation. We are not listening to each other, we're tolerating that we have difference of opinions, but we don't even know each other. And I think this is a clear problem we have completely underestimated. And it's now coming back to us, and we are not able to deal with it in a proper way. We say all these people are racist. Everybody who voted for Trump is a racist. I don't think so. Everybody who votes for a right-wing populist party in the Netherlands is a racist. They are not. But they are really worried about their own future. They're worried about their own way of living. They're worried about, can I still pay my rent? What about my pensions? What about my kids' education? Can I still give my children a better life than my parents could have given me? And the answer is usually no. So I think there we have really an assignment to become, let's say, bolder, clearer in what we want, and also to connect more or tap in more, link more with people's concerns. One of the big issues, and nowadays, and I think it's also interesting here, is of course climate change. I mean, the fact that it's so warm today, it's exceptional. But every day is exceptional. So it's just like, it's going more quickly than we could ever imagine. And what are we doing? Not acting enough. And people see that. So it's like we said, yeah, we need to invest in a green economy, very important. But how are you going to do that? It's not very clear. So I think the fact that, and I know that some representatives of green parties are here today as well, it's very good. To put this very high on the agenda is showing that there is a clear concern from people about climate change. Coming again from the Netherlands, we come from the low countries, so we are below sea level. 50% of the countries below sea level. You see that the Green Party is the second biggest party at the moment in the Netherlands. Why? Because people understand that if you don't do anything in the next 25 years, you can go to school by boat. Because the economical heart of the Netherlands is below sea level. So there will be no country and no companies, there will be no nothing anymore if we don't act now. So I think this is also a message, and I'm always astonished that, but green and fighting climate change, that is part of our agenda. Why don't people turn to us? So it also says something about ourselves. We have to become much clearer about it. Then I think we should, so first of all, we should change a little bit the shift in the focus. And then also I think it is important that we change a bit the way we act and behave. Because what I think is the future is we need to invest more in diversity. Looking at our parties, honestly, and I have been involved in this movement for 25 years, so I think you sometimes have to look in the mirror and look at yourself, but what I see when we do our events, we have a lot of guys in suits of a certain age. When I look at the demographics, I see that, let's say, the average age of a party member in Europe, of any of our parties, is around 58, 59. I think that André Krauwel, who is a researcher sitting in this room, he's working together with us, he really studied this very deeply, but there is an issue, there is a problem. If we only put these people on the stage, taking decisions, talking about diversity, I don't think this is going to be the solution. I think it is important that you practice what you preach. So, if you claim to promote diversity, if you claim to encourage young people to participate in decision making, if you want to have more women to be elected, if you want to have more people from diverse ethnic backgrounds, do something about it. Because it's easy to say, but people will never believe you when you don't show it. So I think there, if we want to survive, and if we want to come back stronger, we really have to invest in it. And I look at the United States because I see something happening there, also in the Democratic Party, and that makes me really hopeful and proud. Because I see that we have people who show leadership, who are from different backgrounds, who are really good candidates, who are doing a great job, so we can do it. But it's just a matter of investing. And so this, I think, is an urgent thing. Then about communication, stop talking about, things in secret language. Talk about stuff in language people will understand. Otherwise, they think we are doing something against them. And so we are all part of our community, so I think it is important that we become, let's say, we show this more clearly. Be authentic, also important, and be hopeful. Because I'm not depressed. I don't think we are going into the cliffs as a progressive movement. I think we have to make some adjustments. Some of it, I already mentioned. Last point is that I think it is important we also invest in alliances, much more than we have done until now. If we don't do that, we might end up without anyone supporting us in 5 years' time. But if we are able to act now, I think we can be very hopeful about the future, because our agenda is still very relevant, and we do have very good people. So important is that we just do it. For the European elections, I'm not sure, but after that, I'm quite sure that we're managing.
Thank you so much, Maria. So that was it, more or less, from the classroom now. And we got very different perspectives, as expected, from a sort of small steps to a bigger picture from Valérie. We got a more kind of like, at least the rough edges of a bigger kind of like policy agenda that really improves people's lives from Jack Markell. Strategic platforms and alliances at the local level that will help changing people's lives. And then we got a little bit of some reminder of that progressives should act what they preach from Maria, and not just adapt their policies, but also their movements and the way how they communicate politics. So that's from us, from the auditorium. Thank you so much for joining us.